From CitrusTV News, this is a special report.
We're nearly 5 hours away from polls closing here in Syracuse, New York. Welcome to CitrusTV Special Report, part of Student News Live. I'm Cora Mayer-Costa.
And I'm Andrea-Rose Oates. There are many issues in the forefront of New York State and congressional districts are being watched on the national scale. Students here at Syracuse University are voting through mail-in ballots and right here on campus.
Our Kaitlin Campbell joins us live at one of these polling sites. Kaitlin, what are students saying?
Hey, good afternoon, guys. I'm here at Syracuse University on Marshall Street, which has one of our polling locations here at Huntington at the School of Education. Now, there is one other polling place on campus, which is at Goldstein, just a mile down the road on South Campus. Both of these polling locations open around 6 a.m. and they'll close around 9 p.m. this evening. Now, as you can see behind me here, people are going in and out of the polling place, and it is packed. I just stepped in there a few seconds ago, and there was a line of at least 20 to 30 people that were ready to cast their ballot. And some were even leaving the polling place because they said the wait line was too long, hoping to come back later, when polling places might not have as long of lines to make their voice heard. But we spoke to students on why it is so important to have polling places on campus.
I think it's so important because, like, I had no clue where I was going to go vote today, and someone was like, oh yeah, it's on campus, and it's very, very convenient. So I know not a lot of people feel comfortable voting online, and it sometimes is better to just vote in person. So I think it's so important to have that accessible to students, especially given that a lot of college students do not have access to cars or public transport that's going to get them to the polling stations that they need to be at.
Now, if you're unsure of where you are voting in New York State, you can check the New York State Board of Elections website and be one of the 13 million voters that are registered in New York to cast their vote and make their voice heard. Reporting in Syracuse, I'm Kaitlin Campbell. Guys, back to you.
Thank you, Kaitlin. Sounds very lively out there. Well, for those students voting here in Syracuse, one race could flip the House, and it's happening right here in Onondaga County.
Incumbent Republican Brandon Williams faces Democrat John Mannion.
We go now to team coverage on this race. Analysts Alex Burstein and Peter Barry are here to break down these campaigns. Alex, we'll start with you. What can we expect to see from John Mannion?
Yeah, Mannion is a state senator who's trying to make that jump into the national scene. But first, let's take a look at what his resume is. He's a Syracuse native, grew up here in the city, went through the SUNY schooling system, and then made the jump to politics after being a biology teacher. So he's really into education and has now been in the state senate for the past 4 years. Every time he's in the race, though, it is very close. We'll go back to 2018, the first time he ran, lost by 2% in a district that is primarily Republican for the state senate. So, you know, did okay his first time around, came back in 2020, gets a solid win, 5% to make his first political victory. And then the really close one, 2022, 10 votes decided he's able to get the win, stay in the state senate. Now he's trying to make the jump all the way to U.S. Congress and flip this seat in New York 22. So what matters to Mannion? We talked about the education stuff, in the student loan forgiveness, has had some big education wins in the state senate. He also wants to expand affordable housing. He's the pro-choice candidate in this race against Brandon Williams. And then finally, Micron. He's very big into that, was helping bring the plant to Syracuse, and this is what he had to say at a debate last month.
They are investing in our community already. They're investing in our STEAM school. They're investing in the Museum of Science and Technology. They're investing in a community engagement board, which is making sure that there's going to be opportunity for everyone to obtain these jobs, particularly our most disenfranchised communities.
Well, Mannion's gained some support from a lot of people across the state and across the nation. You look at some of these big teachers unions from New York and around the country. He is an educator and he's gained the support from them, but also some major political power players. You look at the former president, Barack Obama, who was doing remote phone calls for Mannion, and also the state Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer. So some big time political endorsements. And so what are the projections saying? Actually, right now, Mannion is favored to win by a narrow margin, but he's one of these few Republican current seats that are projected to flip here tonight, so that'll be something to watch. And the main reason why, it's these districts. We'll talk about it more later, but district number 22 has switched a little bit in the past couple of years with redistricting. A lot of Utica and Syracuse voters are Democratic. They're both now in this district, and that's been big here for John Mannion.
Looking now to Brandon Williams, we now bring in our very own Peter Barry. Peter?
Hey, Andy and Cora. So Brandon Williams is trying to make his freshman election year into a sophomore election year in one of the most vulnerable House districts in the nation. But some of the issues he's been trying to tackling have been a little difficult, as the 17 bills he sponsored in Congress, only one of them have passed. But he's also trying to bring in more small businesses into central New York. He's trying to use nuclear energy, and he's also trying to not paint himself as a pro-life candidate. But here's what he said during the debate about the attack ads that Mannion is trying to say.
I will not support a national ban on abortion, and I've said that clearly. I won't vote for a national ban. I support exceptions for abortion, for life of the mother, rape and incest, and I still am pro-life by my faith. And so, but to spend $4 million saying things that I never said is just fear-mongering.
Peter and Alex now joining us at the decks. Now, the interesting part about what he just said is that the money, let's follow this money in this campaign. The total money that these candidates spent is $18 million. Now, the question is, why are they pouring this much money into these attack ads?
It's a very vulnerable district. The congressional district in 2022, Francis Cannell only lost by 1%, and $18 million has been spent all across the district. Across New York, 1.2 million doors have been knocked on to help Democrats, and 5 million phone calls have been made. But in some of these attack ads, they're trying to paint John Mannion as this Albany liberal, as this insider, but he's only been in the state Senate for about 2 terms now.
Yeah, it's only been 4 years for him, and also he's had a pretty successful term in the state Senate. He's a rather popular politician down there. You look at how he was able to win in a majority Republican district. That's why the Republicans feel this is a candidate that can really challenge Brandon Williams, and that's why they're spending so much money. And also that's why the Democrats are spending so much. This is a seat that they feel they can actually flip. That's not something you can do often in New York, flip a Republican seat to a Democrat or vice versa, but this is a rare scenario where it's actually possible. And you mentioned it, Peter, these door knocking initiatives for the Democrats, it's kind of unlike as ever been seen here in New York. Over 1 million doors knocked in just the past couple of weeks, and they're really trying to get out the vote, especially on the Democratic side.
Yes, definitely a money-spending district, Alex and Peter. And talking about 2022, we know that Republican Brandon Williams won the 22nd New York district by a 50.5% lead compared to his Democratic competitor. So do we think that Brandon Williams kind of has the same leverage in this race, or does it look a little different now 2 years later? What do you all think?
Yeah, I mean, currently it's leaning Democrat according to a lot of the polls, so there has been a little switch up here, but it was one of the closest races in the nation in 2022, and it was close in 2020 as well. This is a swing district, as swing as it gets. It goes back and forth between the two challengers, but the difference for Democrats this time around is you have an experienced politician coming to the table. That's not what they had in Cannell in 2022. Now you have Mannion. He's still young when it comes to being in politics, but he's served 2 terms in the state Senate. Now he has some more experience under his belt. Hasn't run a perfect campaign by any means, but he knows how to run a campaign, and that's really helped kind of swing here in 2022 to 2024.
Definitely.
This election was decided in 2022 by less than 3,000 votes. So it's definitely going to be hard to make up some ground for Williams, especially with the new redistricting by the New York State Legislature. But we could possibly see Williams, as some Syracuse professors are saying, by 4 to 7 points in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, New York 22 is one of the most contentious races in the nation. And going into the redistricting, you brought up, Alex, earlier, how does this change the sway of the race?
It's a big swing. I mean, you've added about 10,000 Democratic voters. Before this redistricting, probably wouldn't have been a close race. It still is a close race, but as you said, Peter, I mean, this seems like it's most likely going to be a Mannion win, especially the campaign has been going well towards Mannion's favor in the past couple of weeks. But you add these voters, now you have the whole area of both Syracuse and Utica, 2 Democratic strongholds in the entire state, both voting in this district, and that's really helped out Mannion over these past couple of months.
Yeah, on the map, it adds Auburn, which is actually Jill Biden's hometown. So Biden dropping out of this race, even though Onondaga County is a +8 Biden county in 2020, it might have helped Williams. They also remove Oneida County, which 2/3 of the people there voted for Williams.
Wow, this is definitely an exciting race to follow, so thank you, Peter and Alex, for joining us for this. Now, to the latest now on the developing story regarding the Onondaga County Board of Elections. Citrus TV investigative reporter Luke Welch is live from the board with the new details. Luke?
Yeah, Cora, it's been a hectic month here at the Onondaga County Board of Elections due to a backlog of these 23,000 voter registration forms, which the state BOE has deemed not been processed at a fast enough rate. They sent then 9 employees from Albany here to Central New York to try to get through these necessary duties before Election Day today. I reached out to both county commissioners who refused to comment on the inefficiencies, but the I-team has been covering the story for over a year now, and they say their issues lie in a lack of funding.
We have a deficit here in Onondaga County in terms of man hours and personnel hours that we are putting towards our elections. And we make up for that by adopting technology, by working very hard and being very dedicated. And we're not asking for the moon. I believe we were asking for 6 positions. And that would have been enough to help us get our head a little bit above water. We still would have been ranked almost dead last.
And while the county executive was also not available to comment, he did respond to those statements last year, saying that they're receiving more and more each year and that their amount that they're receiving is adequate.
I think what Dustin's talking about is the 2024 budget, which he asked for a lot of money and without having a lot of facts, as usual. And what we did is we gave the Elections Commission more money than we did the previous year, a lot more money. But also a lot of these state mandates, we're challenging our commissioner. Don't go just ask for changes to policy and create new costs for the local taxpayers.
Now, in a leaked letter from the State Board of Elections to these county commissioners, they said that based on log data provided to us, our analysis of productivity over the past 9 weeks reveals several important insights: inconsistent productivity among county staff and leadership and management issues. 2 employees had been terminated since these letters have been leaked, and we'll have all the continued updated details here on Citrus TV News. For now, I'm live from the County Board of Elections. Luke Welch, Citrus TV, iTeam News. Cora and Andy.
Luke, thank you. Onondaga County is sitting in a sea of red when looking at previous elections. In 2020, President Biden won Onondaga County by a 20-point margin, yet just north in Oswego County, Trump won by a similar margin. Our Jude Bazerman has more on the polarization of voters and how geography is playing its part.
We apologize for the technical difficulties, but definitely would be a really interesting story to see. So, I mean, we have a lot for store for Student News Live. Well, coming up, live the issues targeting voters here in Central New York.
Plus, how national candidates are targeting college voters.
Stay tuned.
Looking for these? You drive buzzed. It could be one very expensive ride.
First, you gotta make bail. Then pay me to get your car back.
Your insurance premiums will go through the roof.
And my legal fees just keep adding up. All told, it could end up costing you $10,000.
Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
Welcome back to Student News Live. One of the core issues of this election is gun control. Earlier in October, Governor Kathy Hochul announced the state seized nearly 8,000 legal guns this year.
And our Anjana Dasan reports the future of gun control is an issue being tackled at the national level and right here in Syracuse.
The U.S. has seen 58 school shootings in 2024 alone. Gun violence has been an ongoing issue for the country, and in this election, both candidates have expressed their views on gun control. Throughout Kamala Harris's campaign, she's expressed her intention to ban assault weapons and crack down on ghost guns. Earlier this year, Harris announced the launch of the National Extreme Risk Protection Resource Center to implement red flag laws. Harris has made it clear that she still supports the Second Amendment. And Donald Trump has claimed to be the, quote, most pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment president. During his presidency, Trump has sent mixed signals on his support for universal background checks. However, after school shooting in Florida, he supported a legislation to expand background checks, but the measure failed in the Senate. While both candidates support the right to bear arms, the debate largely centers around how to control mass and school shootings in the country. One community member, Clifford Ryan, is a founder of an organization used to stop gun violence, and he thinks that thorough background checks are required for those purchasing firearms.
But if you got an individual coming in the store buying 4 and 5 guns, or buying a M16 rifle, you want to know, why are you buying that rifle? You want to know, what are you going to use it for? However, some feel like more restrictions are unnecessary. Treasurer of the SU College Republicans Club, Cruz Thapa, says that Trump's policies would be better than Harris's and doesn't trust the government to make accurate background checks.
I know that of myself, I like open carry. Like I'm a little bit extreme on that, but I can tolerate like concealed carry. I think it's a little weird how like just having it out is trouble. With the results closing in soon, it's safe to say we can expect attention to stricter laws from Harris, while Trump has signaled that he would not enact any new gun restrictions if re-elected. For Election Night 2024, Anjana Dasam, Citrus TV News.
Thank you, Anjana. Social media campaigns for both Trump and Harris have been a huge component of this election cycle.
Analyst Isabella Galan is here to break down how young voters are responding to these social media campaigns. Isabella?
That's right, guys. In the digital age, social media is everything. And as we have seen with this presidency, that's no different. While using the internet to campaign is not entirely new, the new methods of campaigning done by Harris and by Trump are definitely very different. When Trump originally ran for president in 2016, his presence on Twitter, now known as X, was very widely known. However, after he was banned from the app in 2021, he formed his own app called Truth Social in 2022. While this app rose quickly to the top of App Store charts, it is dominated by conservative political commentary and really only appeals to Trump supporters. Even though the majority of voters are not getting their information from Truth Social, they are getting it on TikTok, especially young voters. And taking a look at this poll done by Pew Research Center, it shows that young adults are really using TikTok to keep up with politics and get their news. 36% are using it to keep up with politics, while 41% simply have TikTok to find their news. And when looking specifically at the age ranges of 18 to 29, those numbers go up. It goes up to 48% for keeping up with politics and 52% for news. So it's showing that while young voters know what social media is and that they know that it is a driving force, they recognize that it also shouldn't be the only place where voters are getting their information.
I feel like it's really easy to get your news from social media, but you have to remember there's a lot of misinformation out there. I think it's great that social media is being used to, get people out to vote, get them to register to vote, but as a voter, you have to take things into your own hands and look up information on your own.
Regardless, Harris has still used the power of social media to her advantage, focusing primarily on capturing the Gen Z vote. In addition to traditional campaign videos, her team also posts TikTok videos mimicking popular trends that don't necessarily even have anything to do with policy, but young people are still taking notice and they like these new TikTok changes. At Team Trump on TikTok has also been posting their own clips to try to gain support from young voters. However, the Harris campaign is definitely at a little bit more of an advantage, given that at Kamala HQ has 5.2 million followers on TikTok, while Team Trump only has 4.5 million. And with this presidential race being as close as it is, social media and the Gen Z vote could change the course of this election. And it's going to be interesting to see how that will change and how that will play out today, and how both campaigns will change their strategies, if at all, today during the rest of the election.
Yeah, I mean, Isabella, with the whole social media vote sway, it's really interesting that you bring this up too, because do you see different people on different apps? I mean, especially with Elon Musk just recently coming out with his support of former President Donald Trump, it's interesting to see how people on X really only get specific content towards them instead of rather than you might not see a Harris ad on there. How do you see that at play?
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like when talking about TikTok, I feel a lot of it is definitely geared toward the Harris campaign, as we've seen with the followers and also just people and young people in general just always seeming that they're getting Kamala HQ TikToks in comparison when you're going on an app more like Twitter, you're starting to see a little bit more of those Republican candidates and those campaigns. So it's definitely very interesting to see the difference between social media apps. And I feel like even thinking about Instagram playing a role in that, it's very different from TikTok. The people that are on TikTok may not necessarily be seeing the same reels that are being posted on Instagram. So it's definitely a very different change. And I think it all comes down to age demographics specifically. We see a lot more younger people on apps like TikTok versus a lot more older people on Facebook, Instagram. So it's definitely playing a difference there as well.
And I think going off of that, what's really interesting is a lot of these social media platforms, they're definitely under a lot more pressure this election season to make sure that all the news that's being produced on their different platforms is real and it's authentic. Recently, actually, there was a video that we found out that Russia was behind of ballots being ripped up and burned, unfortunately, in Pennsylvania. And it was something that Elon Musk actually reposted, but however, it's a completely fake video. So how do you think these social media apps and platforms are trying to manage that pressure and stress of making sure that everything that's on their platforms is real and authentic?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something that comes with a lot of its challenges, but I think also in the responsibility of those apps, it's also in the responsibility of the consumer to know. We listened to some students earlier, and when I got a chance to talk to them this morning while they were coming out of the polling site here on campus, they were talking about how it's important to really fact check and make sure that they're not only just using social media for their news, because at the end of the day, it isn't a fully trustworthy news source, and that we need to go to other places to get credible resources as well.
Well, Bella, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Focusing on Central New York, the area has been a key region during the Biden-Harris administration with the move-in of Micron as part of the Chips and Sciences Act.
Former President Trump has also looked to change the act. Our very own Ben Bascuk is in studio with us more on the Chips and Science Act and how these changes might affect the region. Ben?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. While voters across the country point to the economy, immigration, and abortion as their primary concerns, Central New Yorkers are focused on a completely different issue. That issue, when they hit the polls today, microchips. President Biden signed the bipartisan Chips and Science Act into law, investing nearly $53 billion in funding to bring semiconductor supply chains back to the United States. The very bill Micron Technology is relying on to bring a massive factory here to Syracuse. But after regulatory delays, the project could turn out to be a false hope, depending on who takes the White House tonight. Former President Trump previously attacked the CHIPS Act, noting the deal is, quote, so bad, while planning to hit Taiwan with tariffs on import chips. His plan? To move manufacturing back to the U.S. Our Citrus TV's own Luke Radel pressed Speaker of the House Mike Johnson on his approach to the CHIPS Act should Republicans take control of Congress.
The former president has said that he doesn't support the Chips and Science Act. You voted against it. If you have a Republican majority in Congress and Trump in the White House, will you guys try to repeal that law?
I expect that we probably will, but we haven't developed that part of the agenda. Obviously, the CHIPS Act is hugely impactful here, and my job is to keep lobbying on my side.
Yeah, and so Speaker Johnson did say that he misheard the question, has since walked back those statements, but he said those statements right in front of Brandon Williams, who is, like we talked about earlier in the show, in a very politically vulnerable seat. So Brandon Williams actually came out and said, quote, the CHIPS Act is hugely impactful here. I will remind him night and day about the importance of the law. So definitely appealing to constituents. I think Republicans are kind of walking that tight line now between the representation in Washington, D.C., and then kind of those Democratic policies like the CHIPS Act that passed that really do impact those here in Central New York.
Yeah, it's super interesting too, because while Johnson has said he would support the semiconductor industry here in Clay, he also has been outspoken that he is against the Green New Deal. So how do you see this affecting the CHIPS Act and complicating this?
Yeah, let's talk Green New Deal. You guys are definitely dressed for the occasion here today. So he has said when he came out against the CHIPS Act in the vote preliminary wise, he said that he wants to eliminate those Green New Deal requirements from the bill. Now, when we look at right here in Central New York, Biden has exempted some federal environmental reviews, including the one of Micron right here. I got a chance to visit the wetlands where Micron is planning on building that plant, and he says that he's overriding that to prevent unnecessary delays. Now, I went back in November of 2025. That's where it's being pushed to now, that building in the wetlands, because it's going to impact natural aquatic resources, certain populations. Again, kind of confiscating that environmental review. Biden's pushed past it. Again, like we said, walking that fine line between representation here in CNY and representation in Washington, D.C.
Yes, and Ben, so Let's speak to both of the candidates, obviously Trump and Harris. How are the regulatory policies going to affect the Micron supply chain if one of them were to be elected the next president of the United States?
Yeah, no doubt both candidates' policies are going to impact and pressure the supply chain. In July, Trump made comments that caused the SMH ETF, which is a kind of like a conglomeration of all the most liquid microchip companies finding their averages and stock prices. It lost about $675 billion off its market cap. So if that's what rhetoric is going to do alone, we have to look at, okay, what is regulation going to do? So Trump's policies mainly rely on tariffs. We've seen him press tariffs relentlessly, talking about how his economic plan is going to be funded by tariffs. At the end of the day, tariffs drive up prices. It happens to consumers, it happens to supply chains. It's going to pressure inflation to go up. Harris's policies are going to focus more on regulations, whether that be environmental, but really focusing on those exports, and it's going to directly impact domestic sales, like companies like Micron, like NVIDIA, that are producing those microchips.
Thank you, Ben. Definitely going to be interesting to follow and see how they interact, both administrations, the Trump and Harris, with the CHIPS Act. It's very a divisive point. Now, moving it, our Isabella joins us on the desk. With the closing of the New York polls just hours away, the polls are in favor of the state once again going blue.
According to a Research Co poll released yesterday, Harris is up by a 16-point margin.
It's pretty big. Pretty big margin, I gotta say. But one of the cool things that is very interesting is how early voting is definitely impacting this. A lot of people have been going to those polls early, whether that is through mail-in ballots or just going to those early polling locations. And they said nearly 500,000 more New Yorkers voted earlier this year than in 2020. So 2.98 million people voted early during 2020, or this year actually, and then 2.51 million voted early in 2020. So it's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, what's also interesting is that New York State has historically voted for blue in the past near 10 elections, yet upstate New York has always been usually red for the majority, with around 41 out of the 62 counties being red in the last year's election, 2020. So why is this the case? Do you see this?
I mean, honestly, I really just think, like you said before, and like how we've all been talking about, the issues are a lot more prevalent this year, and people, I think, are a little bit more passionate about it this year, about the issues, whether that is with Micron, whether that is with abortion. People are really, really passionate about all these things that the candidates are talking about, and I think it's making people want to go out and vote more.
Yes, I want to quickly go back to social media if we can, because obviously today's the big day. We've been talking about this for so long. How has the social media push been specifically today? Has there been a lot more on the, Kamala HQ side? Has there been a lot more on the Trump side? What have you seen so far today?
So far, honestly, I've been seeing a lot from the viewers, from the fans, a lot of them making fan edits, which is kind of crazy, the fact that our presidential candidates are getting fan edits made of them. But I've been seeing a lot of people in support of both sides really just trying to make that final push for the candidate of their choice.
Yeah, Isabella, you talked a lot about early voting. I think something different we saw this year is that both Republicans and Democrats are encouraging their supporters to vote early in the polls. What we're going to look at tonight is that red mirage going to hit? Are we going to see conservative votes come in earlier? Are we going to see districts and counties and states lean conservative up front and then maybe swing Democrat later in the night and later this week? Something we're definitely looking at. But just interesting that both parties are asking voters to go to the polls early this cycle.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the numbers in the state, the registered Democrats outweigh registered Republicans 2-1. So that's a really huge disparity, and it's interesting to see how that'll interact in the polls.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Trump spoke in New York, had that rally at MSG the other day. And I think a lot of people are concerned, Trump team members specifically, they're not feeling as confident after that rally when he came out and said certain comments about Puerto Ricans, when he came out and said certain comments about New Yorkers. And so we're going to have to see if that is going to resonate here in the state. Is that going to drive other down ballot races like the one here in New York 22? Is it going to push Democrats across the finish line? What's going to happen there?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be something to watch this day. I'm very excited about it all.
Yeah, and I mean, the polls close at least here on Syracuse University's campus at 9 p.m. So we still have some time. There's still some time to go out and vote, but it'll be interesting to see, especially later on in the night, how those numbers fluctuate and who's going to end up on top in the state of New York.
Definitely.
Yeah, for the final thoughts, it'll be really interesting to figure out what are the key issues voters are voting for this election, because there's such a high amount of people doing early voting, going to the polls. So I don't know what you guys think are the key issues making people go to the polls this year.
Yeah, I think it varies by region. I think when we look at like the Midwest and the blue wall states that we know Harris and Trump both need at least a couple to win, that's abortion. That's a lot of female voters going to the polls. That's college educated voters voting Democrat. But now it's more of a move towards mobilization. So it's can we get people off the couch who do support us to go to the polls? Right. And so that's what this race is going to come down to, is are the demographics that matter going to come out and vote tonight?
Definitely. And I think another great thing about it is some states, not all of them, unfortunately, do have same-day voter registration. So I think people will definitely take advantage of that today as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. That's the time we have on this segment of Student News Live with Citrus TV.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Instagram and X at CitrusTV News. And tune in tonight to our very own Election Night special on our YouTube page. I'm Andrea-Rose Oates.
I'm Cora. Have a good one.